A depressed teenager spends the summer with her grandparents, which inevitably changes her view on life. In the opening scene, we are introduced to the protagonist Greta. She is on her way to her grandparents' New Jersey house and dreads the way there. Comparing the place to hell, she wishes not to exist as it would solve everyone's problems. Having to live amongst old people, she considers giving her pills for anxiety to her grandmother, so everyone would be calm. After pranking the man sitting beside her on the bus, Greta finally arrives in New Jersey. Her grandparents are happy to see her, but the same couldn't be said about her. On the ride back to the house, her grandfather tries to make small talk, but it all leads to failure. While Greta is happy to be out of school, she is dredging up the thought that she'll have to spend her summer with them. Staying in a nursing home would be the same for her. College gets mentioned and she lets them know that she's not going. Not because she doesn't want to, but because she plans to unalive herself when she turns 18. Her grandma asks her not to joke around with such serious topics, but she takes out her notebook to prove it. In the notebook, she has written things she wants to do before unliving herself, as well as different ways to perish. As she lists the many ways she plans to do it, Grandma asks her to stop. Greta then lists the things she wants to do before committing, and she seems to be quite serious. Worried and conflicted, her grandparents stay quiet. As they arrive at the house, Mrs. Wachowski, an old lady next door, greets Greta. The old lady doesn't like Greta, so she makes snarky comments about her makeup. Greta doesn't keep quiet either. She begins telling a story about an alien just to scare the old lady, and even proceeds to whisper some of the parts before making a loud boom sound. Walking into the house, she is surrounded by endless decorations of shells and other things from the ocean. Getting to her room, she searches for a shelf to put her books on but ends up stuffing them under the mattress. Playing with the cat, she hears a teapot boiling, so she follows the noise. From the vent, she overhears her grandparents talking about her and how complicated she is. Her grandfather compares her to her mother, which sends Greta over the edge. She screams loud enough for them to hear that she's nothing like her mother. Later in the afternoon, as they're enjoying lunch, Greta asks for $20 from her grandfather. Her grandma chimes in, reminding her that there are some ground rules she needs to follow. She lets her know that if she wants to have spending money, she'll have to get a job. Her curfew is at 10 p.m. and she's not allowed beyond the town lines, especially not in Asbury Park. Chuckling, Greta informs her that she'll go out whenever she wants, with whomever she wants, and if there's a problem she should take it up with her mother who dumped her at their house in the first place. Suggesting they stay out of each other's business, Greta grabs her sandwich and heads out. Sitting on the swing, she gets approached by her grandfather. He hands her a popsicle and they sit in silence. Looking at the vintage car in front of her, she asks whether she can borrow it and her grandpa says no. Given that she doesn't have a driver's license, she's not allowed. Her grandma is not worried about her dying, but taking other lives with her. The days pass as Greta gets even more bored. She calls the place Ocean Grave given its elderly population and lack of places for entertainment. Writing in her diary, she understands why her mother had left the place when she was 17 and hopes to get out of there as soon as possible. Looking around, she sees some old boxes, so she decides to rummage through them. After going through some old pictures, she comes across her grandma's old dress, which she decides to try on. Getting down the stairs, she plops on the couch, ready to watch some reality TV. To her surprise, the TV doesn't have any programs, so she asks her grandma Catherine. She's excited to see her granddaughter in her dress, but the excitement goes away quickly once Greta opens her mouth. She doesn't understand how they survive without cable, but Catherine tells her to go to the ocean and have some fun. For the first time, she listens to her advice and decides to take a stroll around town. Looking at the ocean through a periscope, she sees a sign that prohibits driving and swimming in the ocean. Naturally, she decides to break the rules and even tries to drown herself in the process. After a failed attempt she walks along the shore when she spots a help wanted sign. The boss has a hard time getting a word in as she assures him that she can do the job, despite not having any experience. He tries to get her to fill out an application form and try to get a job the right way, but she demands a yes or no answer. Julie, an employee, advises the boss to give her the job because he doesn't know how to say no. Greta doesn't like that he's chiming in to help her, so she tells him to back off. Regardless, Julie lets her know that they're short-staffed and that he's not trying to help her get a job. The poor boss continues struggling to get a word in, so Greta informs him that she'll be starting work tomorrow at lunch hour, before getting up and leaving. When she arrives back at the house, she sees her grandparents playing cards on the front porch. She can't fathom the fact that they're spending their nights like that, and she makes it known. Her mother had called, so they advised her to call back using the cell phone on the piano. As expected, her mother tells her that she's trying to save her marriage and that is the reason she's at her grandparents' house. Given that it's her third marriage, Greta becomes even more furious. She screams at her, informing her that she can take as much time as she wants because she doesn't care about her. Tears run down her cheeks as she hangs up the phone, trying to calm down. Her grandmother feels bad, so she gives her a look of sympathy. Greta knows that her life would have been different if her father was alive. She might have turned out to be a better person, friendlier, and maybe even full of life. Unfortunately, she only has her diary to express her pain and to complain about. In the morning, Greta gets ready for her first day of work. On her way to the restaurant, she passes the elderly, which only makes her want to commit termination even more. Luckily, her sarcasm and rude nature are well accepted by the customers. Walking to a table, she puts down the many cocktails the customers have ordered. She hands everyone the wrong drink, but when they let her know about it, she tells them to figure it out themselves. The customers still haven't decided what they want to eat, but she lets them know that she won't be coming back if they don't order right away. All of them start laughing, finding her demeanor rather entertaining. By the end of her shift, the boss compliments her on her work ethic, given the large amount of tips they've gotten. Greta takes her money and heads out. Outside the restaurant, she sees Julie feeding a stray cat, so she jokes about him wasting the food. He doesn't get her joke, which only makes her want to get away even faster. However, he stops her to properly introduce himself to her. He compliments her work as well, but she lets him know that she already hates the job. On her way home, she decides to break some more of Catherine's rules before she ends the night. After walking for a while, she finds herself in front of Asbury Park, and instead of walking away, she sneaks past the gates to explore the area. Inside the park, she sees why Catherine had warned her about it. From catcallers to junkies, she sees it all and even encounters a fight so gruesome that makes her take fighting off her list of ways to end it herself. Luckily, an officer spots her and takes her home. When she arrives, she sees Catherine on the porch, and instead of letting her know that everything is fine, she only makes a snarky comment about being arrested, shaking her up even more. The officer assures Catherine that she isn't in any kind of trouble. Before Greta goes to sleep, Catherine goes to her room. Greta doesn't admit that she's in the wrong. Instead, she tells Catherine not to plant any idea in her mind. The following morning, Catherine talks with the old lady next door, who complains about Greta being a pain in the butt. Ashamed, Catherine promises to make Greta apologize before returning to the house. But the fiasco doesn't stop there. As they walk in, they see a guy installing cable on the TV, something Catherine doesn't want. Greta lets them know that the only way she'll stay out of trouble is by watching TV. Having had enough, Catherine tells her husband that they have to send Greta back because she's unbearable. Nevertheless, her grandfather resolves the situation and even signs the papers for the cable. Remembering her promise, Catherine snatches the TV remote from Greta and tells her that she needs to apologize to the neighbor. Of course, Greta argues back, but eventually, she goes to the lady next door. Instead of apologizing, Greta threatens to use the opened windows to get back at the old lady for snitching on her to her grandparents. Despite finding her job progressively boring, Greta continues to work because she needs the money. Two gentlemen have the trouble of picking what kind of fish to eat, so they ask her. Greta lets them know that she's too poor to eat at the restaurant, so therefore she doesn't know what the perch tastes like. Regardless, she decides to go to the kitchen and ask Julius what it tastes like. Surprised that she hasn't tried fish before, he asks her to come next to him so he can feed her. As he lets her have a taste of both, their eyes stay glued to each other. He recommends the catfish over the perch, which is what Greta ends up serving the gentleman. Finishing her shift, she starts walking back home when she hears a bike behind her. Cursing him out, she thinks that it's one of the catcallers, but is surprised when she sees Julius. He asks her whether she ever lets her tough persona down, so she lets him know that she never does. Being the gentleman that he is, he offers a ride, to which she laughs, assuming that the bike is his brother's. Regardless, he offers her once again and asks her to promise to be nice. She ends up promising and getting on the bike, so they drive around the town. They stop at an abandoned building, and as she gets down, she sees a tattoo of initials on his wrist. Assuming that it's from a girlfriend, she says that she must have been a lucky girl. To her surprise, he informs her that it's his deceased best friend. Changing the topic, she asks where they have fun. He lets her know that he tries not to have fun but focus on becoming a good chef, and hopes one day to have his restaurant. Curious, she asks where he had learned to cook, so he decides to open up to her. She lets her know that he used to be in prison for joyriding. He had learned how to cook in prison, and that wasn't the only thing he'd learned. She jokes about the correctional system correcting him, but he assures her that he's serious. When she returns home, she thinks about her time spent with him. Beating herself down for saying the wrong things, she wishes to be more careful when talking to him. Before going to bed, she admits to herself and the diary that she likes him. The following morning, she watches TV with Catherine, who is already addicted to the programs, so much so that she doesn't let Greta change the channel. Her grandfather walks down the stairs, happy to see the two of them getting along. He asks Greta to join him in fixing the boat, but she denies it, letting them know that she has plans with Julius. Happy to hear about her new friend, Catherine asks her to invite him for lunch. Little does she know who Julius is. When Julius comes to the house, he approaches her politely, but she turns him down, thinking that he's trying to sell her something. He asks for Greta, and luckily, Greta comes out to greet him. As they're having lunch, Greta lets them know that Julius is a great chef. Things take a dark turn once she tells them that he's learned how to cook in jail. Naturally, her grandparents are surprised, but they take it lightly, especially after Julius assures them that he's learned his lesson. Having expected a different reaction, Greta begins to feel bad, as she should. After having lunch, Julius leaves in a hurry with Greta following behind. She yells for him to stop, running after him, and when he does, he asks her why she's acting like that, and why she needs to put him down to make herself look better. He gets no answer to his question, but the tension is so strong that she notices that he wants to kiss her. They finally kiss. After the passionate making out session, he reaches into her pocket and pulls out her unalive notepad. She tries to snatch it away from him, but he reads all of the things she wants to do before leaving the mortal world. He finds it bizarre, so he starts laughing. She yells at him, asking him not to laugh at the only thing she's serious about. Realizing that she's serious, he tells her that it's the dumbest thing he's ever heard, and she doesn't hold back, saying that wanting to open up a restaurant is the dumbest thing she's ever heard. Nevertheless, she opens up to him. From her perspective, you only get 16 years of good life while you spend the rest of 60 running away from demise. Given that she only has one more year in high school, she's trying to enjoy in the meantime. Embracing her in a hug, he whispers in her ear that she needs to be more grateful for how privileged she is. Turning around, she assures him that she is sharing a passionate kiss. Surprisingly, Greta returns to the house at reasonable hours, but seeing that no one's home, she decides to check whether her grandparents are sleeping. Barging into their room, she sees her grandparents making love, which scars her for life. In the morning, she decides to poke fun at them, something Catherine doesn't stand for. Luckily, her grandfather drags her to work on the boat with him. She stays lying on the couch as he works on the engine. Before he starts the car to drive back, he asks her about the pill her grandmother had found in the bathroom. Not wanting to lie to him, she tells him that's the only medication she was prescribed for her mental health. Given that it's by a doctor, he suggests she take them, but she reveals that they're only from a doctor who listens more to her mother than her results. He reminds her that her mother is only doing that because she loves her, but Greta finds it hard to believe this. Frustrated, she asks him why she's spending the summer with them, and he lets her know that it's because her mother doesn't know what to do with her. Reality hits Greta like a rock and it leaves her conflicted. She starts screwing up at work as well. Luckily for her, she serves the same customers she had on her first day and they find her attitude entertaining. Unfortunately, her boss ends up overhearing the conversation, so therefore he pulls her to the side for a chat. Asking her not to act like that anymore, he tells her he'll send another waitress to the table only for her to calm down. On her way back, a guy asks for a refill and she rejects him rudely. Her boss has the final straw, so he sits her down once again to explain to her that she can't be acting like that. Despite telling her that she's a bright girl who has a chance to have a better career, she takes it the wrong way and asks whether he's going to fire her. Having had enough, he asks her to take the next day off. She makes it known that she's not coming back by throwing a fit before leaving the restaurant. Julius runs after her, begging her to stay while promising to fix things between her and the boss. However, she rejects it, certain that she's not going back. After telling him to come by her grandparents' house after work, she leaves in a hurry. In the evening, she can be seen getting ready for her night with Julius. Right as he's about to back down from their plan, seeing that everyone's asleep late in the night, she comes out on the balcony and asks him to climb to her room. Being young and dumb, he listens to her and decides to climb by the side of the house to her balcony. Unfortunately, the old lady next door sees him climbing and assumes that it's a robber. Unaware of what's about to come, the teenagers start making out as they lay on her bed. Greta pulls out protection, but he refuses to use it. Not because he wants to have intercourse without it, but because he doesn't just want to be something she checks off the list, he likes her too much to do it. He compliments her and they start kissing again, but they're cut off by the red and blue flashing lights. Julius panics, not wanting to go to jail again. Instead of staying with her in the room, he decides to go out the same way he came in, which only leads to his arrest. Catherine gets out in her robe, and despite knowing him, she remembers his past and asks whether he was stealing something. Greta comes rushing out of the house, begging the officers to let him go. Even though she tells her grandmother that she has invited him, Catherine decides to call her mother. All of them get in, leaving the poor boy outside. Greta runs after them, begging for Julius to be released. Finally, her grandfather asks them to calm down by promising Greta to fix the situation only if she goes to her room. Catherine continues to talk badly about her granddaughter, so he reminds her that she's her flesh and blood. Joseph manages to keep Julius out of trouble, so when he brings him back to the house he apologizes and expresses gratitude for his actions. Despite her getting him into trouble, he apologizes for causing them problems and admits to liking Greta. However, he is worried about her, which is why he mentions the notebook. Closing the vent so she wouldn't be able to hear them, he asks whether she's ever told him about her father. Joseph tells the story of Greta's father, how he unlived when she was just a little girl, and how seeing him do that had impacted her. Whether it's just a phase or not, he thinks that they should be around her at all times because the trauma is real. As Joseph walks him out of the door, Greta can't help but burst into tears at the consequence of her idea. A couple of days pass and we can see Greta and her grandparents, along with Julius on Joseph's boat. While she and Julius are sitting at the front, Catherine and Joseph are enjoying themselves at the back. She doesn't understand why all of them are spending time together, but he asks her to be grateful because the boat means a lot to her grandfather. Coincidentally, Joseph calls Julius to take over the wheel so he can enjoy some time with his wife. Left alone, Greta looks around, trying to find something interesting. Spotting the anchor just below her feet, she comes up with a brilliant idea on how to commit and give everyone the scare of their life. Accidentally pushing the anchor into the water, she puts her foot in the middle of the rope so she would be tied to the anchor, therefore pulled into the water. It happens abruptly, but luckily Julius jumps into the water to save her. Despite feeling bold, she begins to panic in the water, but Julius manages to pull her out. As they're checking her head to see if her hit is serious, Catherine begins to lose air, so Joseph quickly calls the emergency services. Greta finally begins to feel bad for everything she's put them through, even more now that her grandmother's at the hospital. Joseph lets them know that she's had a small heart attack and will have to remain on pills for a while. In the meantime, he asks them to go home because he'll stay with Catherine until she's allowed to leave. Julius drives them back to the house, but once they get there, he hands her the keys, not wanting to spend any more time with her. She's confused as to why he wants to leave, so he lets her know that his best friend, the one whose initials he has on his wrist, committed in their cell. However, nobody knew that he was depressed because he hadn't told anyone, unlike her. He assures her that the only reason he saved her is because she doesn't want to perish, but wants the drama of it, which is why she did what she did on the boat. As he leaves, Greta is left with her demons. She tries not to think about what she's caused, but the sheer guilt of it keeps her up at night. Rummaging through some old stuff, she finds a letter Catherine had sent Joseph when he had been in the Marines. In the letter, Catherine apologizes for her rude behavior and confesses her love to Joseph, with the hope that she'll see him soon. Greta begins to feel even worse, as she cries herself to sleep. Catherine finally comes back home the following morning, but it's clear she's decided to ignore Greta completely. To make up for the damage she's caused, Greta goes out and buys some of the most expensive flowers to plant in her grandmother's garden. Asking for her to close her eyes, Greta takes out her grandmother on the front porch, and once they arrive in front of the flowers, she asks her to open them. Catherine smiles but doesn't seem to be impressed with her gesture. As she turns back into the house, Greta snaps, letting her know that she's trying to say sorry. Instead of planting flowers in her garden, Catherine asks for those two words to come out of her mouth. She claims that she did, but Catherine informs her that she's not even sure what she's sorry about. While she's fighting for her life, Greta wants to throw away her own, which is something she doesn't understand why. Pulling out the old picture, Greta admits to wanting to be like her, alive and full of life. Catherine smiles as she sees that the photo is of her young self, but assures her that she wouldn't go back in time to be that girl, even if she had the chance. Despite being young, she was clueless, not knowing about the world and not having a perspective. The girl in the picture is just a fraction of the woman she's become, which is why she's excited for what's ahead for Greta. Bursting into tears, Greta asks for a picture of her father. Finding out that Greta's never seen a picture of her father, Catherine begins to feel bad, which is why for the first time in a long time, she embraces her in a tight hug. Their happy moment is ruined once Greta's mother pulls up to the house. Seeing her there only makes her upset. She starts questioning her grandparents about who had called her to come over while claiming that she doesn't want to go home. Her mother lets her know that Catherine had complained about her, but Catherine stands in Greta's defense, claiming that she could stay if she wants to. Her mother doesn't want to hear any of it as she plans to take Greta to a correctional camp for troubled kids like her. Once Greta hears that her mother plans to send her to such a camp, she runs off straight to Julius. She complains to him about being sent away, but he believes that it might be the best thing. For the first time, Greta admits that she's wrong and even apologizes to him, which he thinks is a great start. Returning to the house, she asks whether her mother has left, but, unfortunately, she comes out with Greta's luggage. They start pulling the luggage back and forth, both pleading for the other one to listen. The situation escalates, and everyone from the neighborhood tries to separate them from embarrassing themselves any further. Luckily, Joseph pulls up and calms the situation once again. He asks them to stop, sick of the drama that comes with them, and most importantly, sick of having his wife upset every 15 minutes. He lets his daughter know that there will be no boot camp since the only thing Greta needs is love and attention. She attacks their parenting skills and how Catherine throws her out of the house because she doesn't support her relationship. Not wanting to hear them fight anymore, Greta asks them to stop as she agrees to go to the correctional camp. However, Joseph lets them know that no one's going anywhere because they all have to talk to each other collectively. His daughter tries to plead with him, given that she wants to use her vacation days to go somewhere nice with Edgar, but Joseph wants to hear none of it. Luckily for him, Edgar agrees, claiming that it'll be good for the both of them. While Catherine and Greta are visibly happy, her mother seems to be miserable. Nevertheless, some time passes, and Joseph turns out to be right. The girls eventually start getting along. In the end, Greta accepts life as it is, finally understanding her mother and throwing the unalive notebook to drown in the sea of the place she once hated, but now seems to love.